Hey guys, it's me, XOXO Michael, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about queer lit in public schools, how it would be beneficial and how it would help students become themselves and live the life they want. So to start, I'm going to give you 4 definitions of the word queer, the dictionary, 2 teachers, and my definition. So to start, I'm going to give you the dictionary definition of the word queer. So the dictionary definition of the word queer is an umbrella term that everyone on the LGBTQ plus spectrum falls under. So if you're gay, straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, and everything else that isn't in the main 5 letters, you stand under this umbrella, which is the word queer, and it protects you, and that's how you all kind of fall under. Teacher A says a word that express excuse me. A word that defines everyone that falls on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And then teacher B said they were describing people questioning their sexuality, but she wasn't very comfortable giving that said answer because she doesn't know very much about it. So to segue into that, I'm going to tell you guys the video is going to be split up into a different few categories. Literature that could be used, why I think it'd be beneficial after each section, and then how it could be beneficial. And statistics will be thrown in there, and that's just kind of like an overview. So to start, I'm going to talk to you guys about oh, I forgot to give you my personal definition of the word queer. Mine is it's basically the same as dictionary, the dictionary definition. It's an umbrella statement for everyone that is a part of the LGBTQ plus spectrum. Okay, so to start, I'm going to talk to you guys about both teacher A and B for a second. So teacher A taught in a school in Massachusetts, which is also a low-income school, and that's where she taught. And we'll get into a little bit more of her later. And then teacher B is a high school teacher I had who teaches in my hometown of Canton of Illinois. And then my input is mine because I'm an education major and this is for a project actually. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you guys about is, let me scroll to it in my note page. So this is one of my sources. Does my journey into exploring the classroom, this classroom began when I first learned about the gay and lesbian literature course through my son, who gained access through a choice program to the high school, or at which Sarah is teaching and had taught the class for more than 10 years. Or does it begin much earlier? And that was from the article Reading Queerly in the High School Classroom, Exploring a Gay and Lesbian Literature Course by Kirsten, Helmer. So that actually kind of segues into the first things I want to talk about. So with that, you hear the word, when is it too early to start teaching children about queer lit? So teacher A said it is never too early. Teacher A has a child of her own, and she said that she reads them books all the time about being like queer lit. Also, you have to keep in mind, which is something teacher A told me, queer lit isn't going to be overly sexualized. It's like, if it's for a child, it's going to be like picture books, like 2 parents, 2 bunnies making and like falling in love. It's not going to be anything sexual. Teacher B said that elementary was way too early to teach children queer literature, but she thinks it'd be more appropriate to teach 8th through 12th grade. So with her personal opinion, that's a 14-year gap that they aren't shown the sexuality like branches, so then they aren't really open to it when they get into like 8th grade. If they are taught a book, they're not going to see any of it. They're not going to be as compassionate to the people that fall under the LGBTQ plus spectrum onto it. So, and then mine, I don't think it's ever too early to teach children LGBTQ plus books. And because, in my opinion, the books all really just teach acceptance in love. Love is love is love. And I don't think there should be ever an age limit to teach that. So I have a list of books that could be used for preschool literature. Preschool queer lit. The first book I'm going to talk to you about is A Day in the Life by Marlon Bundo by Jill Twist. It is a very phenomenally written book. It's about a bunny named Marlon, and it's all about his day. How he meets this cute bunny named Wesley, and he falls madly in love. But he is told he can't marry him because boy bunnies can't marry boy bunnies must marry girl bunnies. Which, it's kind of like a comical relief in a sense, because the antagonist of the whole story is a stink bug that represents Mike Pence, because he is so against gay rights. And at the end, it shows how you can love who you love, and that should be accepted. The next one is the story Heather Has Two Mommies. The story is about a little girl named Heather, and that she has two mommies. This is obviously a story more towards like a family with like a lesbian couple with a family. Marlon Bundo is honestly for both gay and lesbian couples. And Heather Has Two Mommy was written by Leslie Newman. And I hadn't had the privilege to read this one yet. And then the last one, which when I was doing my research, hit home, and I'll tell you why when I explain the book a little bit. It's My Uncle's Getting Married by Eric Ross. So the whole premise of the book is Andy is seeing his uncle get married. And his uncle's getting married to another man. His Uncle Mike is marrying his Uncle Steve. And it kind of hit because I have a little niece. And my name's Michael, as you guys all know. So I kind of really felt like if I was to read this to my niece, then she would see like, oh, maybe my Uncle Mike will get married. Hopefully one day I do, besides the point. And then teaching her at the age of 2, that she's not even yet, it'd be fine. And it's helping her learn compassion and just love in general. Which is another reason why I put The Day in the Life of Marlon Bundo on this list, because I bought that book specifically for my niece. And I read it to her quite often when I'm home on break, like I am now because I left early. So it's quite lovely in an aspect to teach her that. See, but the next challenge is I couldn't find really any books for middle schoolers to list. So we're going to skip from elementary / preschool to high school. And I've read 2 of the books on the list I'm about to tell you, and I would strongly recommend both of them. So the first one is Simon versus the Homo Sapien Agenda by Becky Alberti. It is also now a motion picture movie under the title of Love, Simon. It goes all about a cis white male gay character named Simon, and how he navigates his life in high school, and how some things happen to him, and it all takes it down a level, and how he really has to fight with it. The next one I have not read, but it looks phenomenal, and the cover is just very intriguing to me, and I judge books by covers a lot, which is not something I'm proud of, but honestly, what can you do? And it's called Geography Club by Brent Hardinger. So I really have no idea what it's about, but it looks phenomenal. The next book is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Kabowski, which is I have read this one as well. This is the other one I had read out of this list. The Perks of Being a Wallflower is a book that explores so many different things that happen to people in general through life. It talks about substance abuse, rape, mental health, being gay, being bullied, everything. All in one book. It's a very, very emotional book, but it is so worth a read. And if you are a teacher, I would strongly recommend it, because if you read this book, you might see how this is affecting, some of these things in this book is affecting your students. And I promise you might see some of them. And the last book on the list is Aristotle and Dante The Secret of the Universe by Benjamin Arlene Sierra, which teacher A taught it. Her students loved the book, she told me she had roughly 110 students in the class, and only 2 didn't like it. So that's 108 students like that book, which is crazy to think, but, and she also thought that it was going to be a little iffy considering some of the subject matter in the book, because people are always a little immature. We all went through sex ed, but we all still kind of giggle when we hear the word penis and such. But her students loved it. But while in the middle of the book, she stopped and did like a history lesson on LGBTQ plus history and showed them all of the really big things that happened with the help of LGBTQ plus people involved. And so I'd recommend all of those books. They're all going to be listed down below. Like I said, strongly recommend start reading. My personal opinion is I don't think it's ever too early, like I stated earlier. And there's a book on this list, and you can find books online that help you show what a family is to you. If you have an adoptive child, you can find books online. If you have a husband and you're a man, you can find books online. If you have anything like that, you can find them online, and I would strongly recommend getting them and start teaching your children acceptance and love and how to be a kind person as soon as you physically can, because the sooner you start it, the sooner they will learn it, and the sooner they will be accepting of it. So the next thing is the Washington Post is one of my sources. It was written by Samantha Schmidt, and it's all about an article on a Virginia classroom, school district brought in diverse classroom libraries, I'm pretty sure what they were called. And that means there were books about culture, religion, race, sexuality. Those were the main 4. So those were the main 4. And a mother had such strong feelings about the libraries in the classroom that she went in what is a direct quote saying, I really have a problem with people telling children that it's possible to be born in the wrong body by, and Natasha Grover said it. Grover said it. And then a few other things that really stuck out to me in this whole article was saying it's 100% political agenda. And then LGBTQ plus advocates said that they weren't in there to tell kids that they are gay, but so that they can see that, and if they are they are feeling that way or questioning it, then they can see someone like them growing up as a main character in a story, like we do growing up when we're all kind of thrown in this heteronormative society of a boy marries a girl, and we see stories like that all the time, and we never question it, and our teachers don't question it, and neither do our parents. But since these were books that were different, that's when it started to get a little iffy. The books that caused the most uproar were the LGBTQ plus books, which is astounding because they were only, in the libraries, they only were roughly 5% of the books that were brought in. So, and they brought up so much uproar. They caused literally hate debates were started, and parents spoke out at school board meetings and circled petitions demanding that sexually explicit books be removed from classrooms. So even though these books literally could be like A Day in the Life of Marlon Brando, where it's just a bunny and a boy bunny who fall in love, they are sexually explicit. Even though we don't get upset and want like Cinderella to be removed because she marries a prince. But since it is queer lit, there were so many issues with it. So I'm going to tell you guys a few statistics now that could go with when teaching the book Perks of Being a Wallflower if you ever teach it. Since that book touches on so many different teen things that people could go through, it is very hard to read. And if you were to read it with your class, you would have to really make sure that these students might feel this way and that they are going to be able to read through it. So, I got my statistics from, it was a public high school statistic, a teen health survey crucial to the U.S. public policy and is finally asking kids about their sexual orientation by Zoe Slinger. And it said 1.3 million public school kids classified themselves as gay, lesbian, or bisexual, which is roughly 8% of all high school students in America. Nearly 18% of so gay, bisexual, or lesbian students have or will be raped in their time they're alive, which is 3 times more the rate of their straight peers. They are twice as likely to get bullied at home and school. They are twice as likely to stay home to avoid violence. 30% of gay, bisexual, or lesbian teens have attempted suicide, which is more than 4 times the rate of a straight peer. So let that one sink in. 30% of them have attempted suicide. So as a gay man who grew up in a high school that was not very accepting of anything different, I was part of that 30%. And it's crazy to think that people don't see it as a crisis, that if we were taught these things and shown from a young age that it's okay to be who you want to be, that maybe this wouldn't happen. Maybe we wouldn't have a 30% of gay, bisexual, and lesbian teens trying to commit suicide. And 60% reported feeling sad or hopeless, which is more than twice the rate of their straight peers. 60% felt sad or hopeless, which is crazy. So now I'm going to talk to you guys how all of this kind of flows in to the schooling experience I had in a public school in central Illinois. And it was kind of a rough school. Not rough, but rural to an extent. So I'm now going to talk to you guys a lot about my interview with Teacher B. Teacher B, I asked, sorry guys, would you feel comfortable teaching queer lit? She said, if I was teaching in a diverse area, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But teaching in a small town of Canton, the acceptance rate is not as strong as they would be in a big city. Although Canton has made some strides this year with having a gay straight alliance, which is crazy to me because now I'm a sophomore in college and we are just now getting a gay straight alliance, guys. So if that doesn't say anything, then bam. I asked, would you use queer lit in your English classroom? Because I had her as a teacher. She said in the big city. So this all kind of files down to the acceptance rate of growing up in a small town of being so low that she wouldn't even want to teach it because she would be, I don't want to say she wouldn't teach it, because we were taught some queer lit, but it wasn't like, wow, that's queer literature. I said, if so, how would you go about it? And she personally thought it would be better to give students a choice, which yes, I do think it would be a good idea to give students a choice, but also it's kind of how I feel about queer history, which is now becoming mandatory in my home state of Illinois, which is basically, it's not like it's going to be a whole new section added. It's just going to be like, they're going to put back the LGBTQ plus advocates in the areas that they were erased from. And then I asked, who would you have to ask to bring queer lit into your classroom? And it was first the education department, then the principal, then the school board. Which I kind of figured it would flow down like that, but I didn't really think you'd have to ask, I feel honestly, if one of these are shut down at once, you could always go ahead of them and ask, but without 2 of them saying yes, your chances of getting those to come through are so hard. And then I asked, do you think it'd be a good idea to bring in your classroom? And in all capital letters, she said yes. And then I asked, do you think your district would be okay with it? Like I said, guys, not a very accepting area. She said in all caps, no. And I asked why or why not, and she said, no, very small-minded in our town. Which is extremely true. And I said, do you think it should be an additional course or input into normal English? She said, no, I think it should be integrated into our curriculum. We don't have enough English teachers to add a course. So she personally thinks it could be like the ethnic studies lit that teacher A taught, but involve all of that into their normal curriculums that they already have. And then I asked, with LGBTQ plus history coming mandatory in Illinois, do you think queer lit English should be as well? Then I found out that in my freshman English we read Oscar Wilde, which he is considered LGBTQ literature, which I didn't know, so I guess I was kind of thrown out to it. And I said, what challenges do you think would come up while teaching it? And she said, fitting it into the already cut curriculum. Our curriculum here in Illinois is so bad for teachers, and especially public school teachers, so I could only imagine how it would feel to try to fit more into it. And then I asked, do you think it would help students become more comfortable? Some of it would help students, and some would make even more uncomfortable. And then I asked, do you think it would help make students uncomfortable? And she said, some students who may not support LGBTQ plus rights. So those very heteronormative straight students might not find it comfortable to hear. Okay. Here is a list. I gave her a list of books. Actually, I don't even have to do that because I told you guys my list already. Okay. So, another statistic after that harsh reality of so many of things, like, so I read you about my Teacher B interview, which was from a small school in central Illinois. So now I'm going to read you a quote by Teen Vogue from an article, which will be linked below, as will everything else I talk about. And the quote is, I remember feeling actually alone. I think this is still the reality in 2019 for many kids who live in rural and low-income America. So you can see how that is added to everything that I just talked about with my Teacher B interview. Because low-income people really do have to fight a lot with everything. But they have to fight not prosperity, like low income, so they have to fight to get food on the table, to make sure there's a house overhead, everything, which is so rough as it is as a parent, so I can only imagine. But then you have to take a step back and see it from the student's point of view. How, like, I already live in this rural area / low income area, and now I'm not seeing anything like me being exposed, taught in like public schools or anything, which is crazy. So that's like that 30% of LGBTQ plus students have attempted suicide. That could be mostly in that low income area because of how unaccepting most areas are. I don't want to speak for all areas, but a lot of them are very unaccepting. This kind of brings me into my next statistic, which is about drugs. LGBTQ plus students are more likely to use hard drugs. And the statistics I found that I did not know when I was looking up my stuff for this report for you guys is 6% of gay, bisexual, and lesbian students have reported using heroin. 6%, which is 4 times the average of straight peers. That's crazy. Because that is such a hard drug that you don't even know what it could do to affect you. It could be so bad to you, but you're already trying it. So why? And that kind of goes with my topic. Rural and low-income America. So those students in low-income areas are already at a disadvantage. And then you throw in drugs into the mix, and then it's like, wow, I've got drugs at my advantage, I've got this, so why not try it all? My life's already going downhill, so might try it. And that could kind of show how important it would be to teach kids that it's okay to look like them, and if it's being brought into our curriculum, then clearly it does matter. Queering public school pedagogy as a first-year teacher. So this next point of view is from a first-year teacher. Students at my school are not really ready to experience complex issues of identity, but they are already forced to tackle them on their own. So in that light of, they're not ready to really examine them as a class. They're not really ready to break them down, but they're already doing it on their own. So if we were to throw Perks of Being a Wallflower at these students, that they're already breaking down those very complex issues by themselves, if we were to give them this book, they would see that they're not the only ones who have gone through it. Yeah, this may be a book, but that means somebody else thought, wow, teens go through this. So obviously someone else is thinking it. So if we were to give them this book, then it would help incorporate it all. So I personally feel like even though they are tackling those, give them a book, it's going to help them a little more. In my personal opinion, if you give them a book to read, they will find it so much more beneficial than what we would ever think. Okay. The next thing I'm going to talk to you about is so this all kind of goes back to the being queer in a low-income area / rural area of America. So this talks about many districts prohibit teachers from discussing their sexual orientation with students. So in high school, I had a teacher who, probably one of my favorite teachers, was a lesbian. And she's one of the reasons I felt comfortable coming out when I did in my small school. Which, for them, in some district to say that's prohibited, that's not allowed, is really ridiculous to me, considering, wow, I'm not allowed to talk to my students on how I personally feel, but a straight teacher is. And then I'm going to talk to you guys about how some teachers were fired for answering students correctly. So one teacher was fired from her job because she was asked if she was a lesbian. Fired. So now we have to think, it's not even the students at this point who are making such an issue. It is their school district. So maybe if we were to bring this stack of books, this stack of research saying, Queer Lit helps students, and maybe it would open their eyes. And then we had one student teacher who was reassigned for answering a student truthfully when he asked if he was gay. And this one is a little crazier because that happened in Cook County, Illinois, which I'm from Illinois. So, wow. So on all of this, now you guys really know that Queer Lit, in my personal opinion, is so important. If we can drop those statistics from 30% of gay students trying to commit suicide, at least half, cut it in half, what the world would be like. If that book, one book could save a kid's life. One teacher could save a kid's life. And that book could connect you and a student so much more than you ever would know. Like the book Marlon Bundo, The Day of the Life of Marlon Bundo. I read that in my senior year of high school because my art teacher gave it to me. And I was at a time where I was very nervous/scared to come out, and I ended up not coming out. And that book made us come extremely tight, connected, because she could see me for who I actually was without hiding it, and she was accepting of it. So if we had so many more, if we were to read these kids these books at any age, that it would be so important, and it would help them grow, and it would help the community and their school and their classmates and their peers and everyone grow to be able to, that's acceptable. Yeah, you might not be like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but you are Mr. and Mr. Smith. You might not be Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you might be Mrs. and Mrs. Smith. And that could be completely normal, and that's why I think we need to teach that in our schools, so kids like me, gay kids, can see that that is fine and don't have to go through this fight alone through a public school. So now that I am done with this video, I want to give a thanks to Danny, who was my professor for this, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you guys about this and give my input on this. Thanks to both teacher A and B. And so lastly, like I always do, I'm going to end with a quote, and it's going to be, never shut the page on a child just because you don't like what it is. If a child wants to read a book about being gay, let them read that book. If they want to look through pictures with two men holding hands, that's fine. It's not like it's sex, guys. So that's my rant. That's my input. So overall, just stay kind, stay awesome, stay beautiful. XOXO Michael.